You ever have one of those days where you just know someone's trying to push your buttons? That was me standing in my own driveway staring at not one, but two oversized pickup trucks wedged into my garage like a twisted game of Tetris. And the worst part? I didn't even own either of them. That's when I knew HOA Karen was back at it again. Now, if you've never dealt with a full-blown HOA Karen before, consider yourself lucky. Ours has made it her mission to micromanage the entire neighborhood, from the color of our shutters to the angle of our mailboxes. But this time, she crossed a serious line. I came home from a weekend away to find my garage completely blocked. Both bays jammed with trucks I'd never seen before, and both locked up tight. No note, no explanation. Just the smug satisfaction of someone who thinks the HOA rules make her untouchable. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe a contractor got the address wrong. Maybe someone was moving and just needed a spot to park for the afternoon. But as I started asking questions, the pieces came together fast. These weren't just any trucks. They were there on purpose. And the person behind it? Yeah, you guessed it, Karen. Turns out she'd taken issue with some minor violations on my property and decided to teach me a lesson. Blocking my garage was her idea of enforcement. What she didn't know, though, and here's where it gets good, is that I'm not just a homeowner. I'm a co-lease holder, and the other name on that lease, well, let's just say it carries a badge. When the sheriff showed up at the HOA meeting, let's just say the air got real quiet, real fast. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, because before that moment, things got a lot messier. Karen didn't back down. In fact, she doubled down. And what happened next? You're not going to believe it. So here's where things really started to heat up. The morning after I found those trucks jammed in my garage, I went down to the HOA office to get some answers. Of course, Karen was already there, sitting behind the front desk like she owned the place. She didn't even look surprised to see me, just sipped her coffee and gave me that little fake smile she does when she knows she's stirring the pot. I asked her straight up, "Do you know anything about the trucks in my garage?" And without missing a beat, she said, "They're there because you violated Article 4.3 unauthorized modifications to your driveway trim." I thought she was joking. But no, she had printed out a copy of the HOA rulebook and highlighted that one line. Something about the paint on my garage border being half a shade off from the approved palette. Seriously. That's what all this was about. But the thing is, I never received a notice. No warning, no fine. Just immediate action. And that action was basically breaking into my property and blocking my space. I asked her who gave her the authority to do that, and she just smirked and said, "The board approved it." Which is funny, because I happen to know the board hadn't met in over a month. So unless she's making executive decisions on her own, something didn't add up. I started looking into the truck owners, both registered to a private towing company that just so happens to have a donation partnership with Karen's cousin's landscaping business. Now, I'm not saying anything illegal was happening, but it was definitely shady. And Karen, she was acting way too confident, like she didn't think anyone could touch her. That's when I remembered the lease. See, my cousin, the sheriff, helped me move into this place a while back, and we set up a joint lease just for backup on paperwork. I hadn't thought about it in years. But now, that small detail might be the one thing that shifts everything, because Karen had no clue who she was messing with. And what she did next made everything 10 times worse. Later that same day, I came home to find a bright orange violation sticker slapped right across my front door. Not the mailbox, not a polite notice in the slot. My front door. It looked like one of those repo signs, except instead of unpaid bills, it listed a bunch of random community concerns. Things like unauthorized plant height, garage clutter visible from the street, and, believe it or not, decorative lighting outside of seasonal parameters. I stood there, holding the paper, just shaking my head. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was personal. Neighbors started noticing too. One by one, a few of them pulled me aside. Turns out, Karen had been targeting certain homes for months, especially anyone who pushed back on her HOA policies. Some folks had their fences cited, others got mystery fines for excessive noise, even though they didn't own speakers. The pattern was clear. If you didn't play along, you got singled out. I started talking to more people around the block, and the stories kept coming. One woman said Karen tried to block her renovation permit because she didn't like the style. Another guy got fined for parking his car too close to the curb, even though the street was public. Karen had created this little power bubble around herself, and most folks just gave up trying to fight it. They paid the fines, changed their shutters, and stayed quiet. But I wasn't backing down. I started documenting everything: photos of the garage situation, timestamps, Karen's emails, the HOA manual with its conveniently vague language. I filed a formal complaint with the HOA board, but of course, no one responded. A few members even claimed they hadn't seen Karen in meetings lately, even though she claimed board support. That's when it clicked. She might be running things solo behind the scenes, pushing fake approvals, bluffing her authority. If that were true, it could flip the whole situation on its head. Meanwhile, the trucks were still in my garage. I couldn't get them towed without risking legal trouble. And Karen made sure I knew it. And just when I thought she couldn't go any further, she showed up at my door again, this time with a clipboard and a camera. She didn't say a word at first, just stood there in front of my porch, snapping photos like she was building a case for some big courtroom drama. She angled her phone toward my front windows, the gutters, even the welcome mat. Then she turned to me and said, "I've filed a request for a forced compliance inspection." I didn't even know what that was, but it sounded made up, or at least twisted into something it wasn't meant to be. I asked her what grounds she had for all this, and she smiled again, that same smug grin, and said, "Your leaseholder failed to respond to the violation notices, so the HOA is escalating." What she didn't realize is that I'd already spoken to my cousin, the sheriff, earlier that day. He told me he'd been hearing complaints about Karen from other homeowners, too, and he was starting to dig. Quietly, still, I had to play it cool. Karen was acting bold, like she thought she had nothing to lose, but something felt off. Her behavior wasn't just pushy anymore, it was erratic. She started going on about how the HOA had the legal right to intervene on improperly maintained properties. Said the trucks were a placeholder until I showed evidence of compliance. That's when it hit me. She had no real authority to put them there. She was bluffing harder than I thought. But the problem was, still couldn't prove how she got the trucks into my garage in the first place. There were no security cameras nearby, and the HOA office lost the key log for the master garage. Override, all I had were rumors and a trail of suspicious connections. I needed more. I needed a move that would force everything into the open. That's when I heard from one of the newer residents. He'd installed a doorbell camera facing the street, and he thought it might. He picked up something from the night the trucks appeared. I met with him that evening, heart pounding as we queued up the footage, and there she was, in the dark, holding a set of keys, reaching for my garage. There she was, clear as Diavin in the low street lighting, locking my garage like she owned the place. The footage showed her glancing over her shoulder, then waving someone over. A minute later, the two trucks rolled into view, one after the other, guided right into my garage by Karen herself. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just a violation of HOA boundaries, it was breaking and entering. And the worst part, the person she waved over wasn't some random truck driver. It was someone I recognized. Now, everything made a different kind of sense. Karen wasn't acting alone. She had someone on the inside helping her push fake approvals and bury complaints. That's how she kept getting away with things that didn't line up with HOA protocol. Suddenly, all the missing records, the silence from the board, the oddly timed rule updates, it all pointed back to a two-person operation, quietly steering the HOA for their own reasons. I wanted to storm over to the HOA office right then, camera, footage in hand, but something told me to wait. My cousin, remember, the sheriff advised me to hold tight until we could bring the proof to the county housing committee. But word travels fast in a neighborhood like ours, and somehow, Karen found out someone had footage. 2 days later, the neighbor who gave me the video found his mailbox knocked off its post. Then a letter showed up in his HOA file citing exterior negligence. Coincidence? No chance. That was Karen's way of warning him. She was trying to tighten her grip before everything unraveled. Then, as if things couldn't get more twisted, I got a letter not from the HOA, but from a private legal firm. It accused me of obstruction of HOA enforcement and claimed I was creating hostility in a community environment. It even threatened a civil claim. Karen was doubling down hard, throwing legal threats around like candy, hoping